welcome back. All right, so we're working our way through the Rock of a Sure Foundation. We're up to Book 7, Chapter 25 of the Nazarene Acts. It's been a while since I've mentioned exactly what this book is. The Rock of a Sure Foundation is a collection of ancient Christian writings that I've assembled that I believe to be the true gospel, the true teachings of Jesus, Yeshua, and his 12 apostles. There's no writings of Paul or pseudo-Paul within this collection of writings. There are some documents from the New Testament. There's a reconstructed gospel according to the Hebrews, which is the original and true and correct Gospel of Matthew, among other things. And so you can get a copy of this book for free in a PDF form. There's a link in the description where you can download the entire PDF file. And if you want a print copy of it, I'm making that available to you for essentially cost through Amazon Print on Demand. And there's a link in the description for that as well. So you can get a copy of the book. Almost 800 pages long. You can get it for under $18. Pretty good deal. I think it's cheaper than most Bibles are right now. So pick you up a copy of it. You get 2 copies. Give one to a friend. Whatever you want to do. But anyway, that's the book that we're working through. And like I said, we're up to Chapter 25 of Book 7 of the Nazarene Acts, page 317 in the book. So, without further ado, we'll get into it. And when we had come to our lodging, my mother began to ask of me what had become of my father. And I told her that he had gone to seek her and never returned. But she, hearing this, only sighed, for her great joy on my account lightened her other sorrows. And the next day she journeyed with us, sitting with Peter's wife, and we came to Balneus, where we stayed 3 days, and then went on to Pathos, and afterwards Gabala. And so we arrived at Laodicea, where Nicetas and Aquila met us before the gates, and kissing us, conducting us to a lodging. But Peter, seeing that it was a large and splendid city, said that it was worthy that we should stay in it 10 days or even longer. Then Nicetas and Aquila asked me who was this unknown woman, and I answered, "It is my mother, whom God has given back to me by means of my master Peter." And when I had said this, Peter began to relate the whole matter to them in order, and said, "When I had come to Aradus, and had ordered you to go on before us, the same day after you had gone, Clement was led in the course of conversation to tell me of his extraction and his family, and how he had been deprived of his parents, and had twin brothers older than himself, and that, as his father told him, his mother once saw a vision by which she was ordered to depart from the city of Rome with her twin sons, else she and they should perish suddenly. And when she had told his father the dream, he, loving his sons with tender affection and afraid of any evil befalling them, put his wife and sons on board a ship with all necessities, and sent them to Athens to be educated. Afterwards he sent once and again persons to inquire after them, but nowhere found even a trace of them. At last the father himself went on the search, and until now he's nowhere to be found. When Clement had given me this narrative, there came one to us asking us to go to the neighboring island of Aradus to see the vinewood columns of wondrous size. I consented, and when we came to the place, all the rest went into the interior of the temple, but I, for what reason I know not, had no mind to go further. But while I was waiting outside for them, I began to notice this woman, and to wonder in what part of her body she had become disabled, that she did not seek her living by the labor of her hands, but submitted to the shame of beggary. I therefore asked of her the reason of it. She confessed that she was sprung of a noble race, and was married to no less noble husband, whose brother, she said, being inflamed by unlawful love towards me, desired to defile his brother's bed. This I, abhorring, and yet not daring to tell my husband of so great wickedness, lest I should stir up war between the brothers, and bring disgrace upon the family, judged it better to depart from my country with my 2 twin sons, leaving the younger boy to be a comfort to his father. And that this might be done with an honorable appearance, I thought good to feign a dream and to tell my husband that there stood by me in a vision a certain deity who told me to set out from the city immediately with my 2 twins and remain until he should instruct me to return. She told me that her husband, when he heard this, believed her and sent her to Athens with the 2 children to be educated there, but they were driven by a terrible tempest upon that island, where when the ship had gone to pieces, she was lifted by a wave upon a rock, and delayed killing herself only for this, until she said, I could embrace at least the dead limbs of my unfortunate sons and commit them to burial. But when the day dawned and the crowds had assembled, they took pity upon me and threw a garment over me. But I, miserable, entreated them with many tears to search if they could find anywhere the bodies of my unfortunate sons. And I, tearing all my body with my teeth, with wailing and howling, cried out constantly, Unhappy woman that I am, where is my Faustus? Where my Faustinus? And when Peter said this, Niceta and Aquila suddenly started up, and being astonished, began to be greatly agitated, saying, O Yahweh, you ruler and God of all, are these things true, or are we in a dream? Then Peter says, Unless we be mad, these things are true. But they, after a short pause and wiping their faces, says, We are Faustinus and Faustus. And even at the first, when you began the narrative, we immediately fell into a suspicion that the matters that you spoke of might perhaps relate to us. Yet again, considering that many like things happen in men's lives, we kept silence, although our hearts were struck by some hope. Therefore, we waited for the end of your story, that if it were entirely manifest that it related to us, we might then confess it. And when they had thus spoken, they went in weeping to our mother. And when they found her asleep, and wished to embrace her, Peter prevented them, saying, Permit me first to prepare your mother's mind, that perhaps by the great and sudden joy she lose her reason, and her understanding be disturbed, especially as she is now stupefied with sleep. Therefore, when our mother had risen from her sleep, Peter began to address her, saying, I wish you to know, O woman, an observance of our religion. We worship one God who made the world, and we keep his law, in which he commands us first of all to worship him and to reverence his name and to honor our parents and to preserve chastity and uprightness. But this also we observe, not to have a common table with Gentiles, unless when they believe in the reception of the truth are baptized in the name of our Master, and then we eat with them. Otherwise, even if it were a father or mother or wife or sons or brothers, we cannot have a common table with them. Since therefore we do this for the special cause of religion, let it not seem hard to you that your son cannot eat with you, until you have the same judgment of the faith that he has. Then she, when she heard this, said, And what hinders me from being baptized today? For even before I saw you, I was wholly alienated from those whom they call gods, because they were not able to do anything for me, although I frequently and almost daily sacrifice to them. And as to chastity, what shall I say, when neither in former times did pleasures deceive me, nor afterwards did poverty compel me to sin? But I think you know well enough how great was my love of chastity, when I pretended that dream that I might escape the snares of unhallowed love, and that I might go abroad with my 2 sons. And when I left my son Clement alone to be a comfort to his father, for if 2 were scarcely enough for me, how much more would I have saddened their father if he had none at all? For he was wretched through his great affection toward our son, so that even the authority of the dream could scarce prevail upon him to give up to me Faustus, or Faustinius and Faustus, the brothers of this Clement, and that himself should be content with Clement alone. When she was yet speaking, my brothers could contain themselves no longer, but rushed into their mother's embrace with many tears and kissed her. But she said, What is the meaning of this? Then said Peter, Be not disturbed, O woman, be firm. These are your sons Faustinius and Faustus, whom you suppose to have perished in the deep, but how they are alive, and how they escaped in that horrible night, and how the one of them is called Nicetas and the other one Aquila, they will be able to explain to you themselves, and we also shall hear it along with you. When Peter had said this, our mother fainted, being overcome with excessive joy, and after some time being restored and come to herself, she said, I beseech you, darling sons, tell me what has befallen you since that dismal and cruel night. Then Nicetas began to say, on that night, O mother, when the ship was broken up and we were being tossed upon the sea, supported on a fragment of the wreck, certain men whose business it was to rob by sea found us and placed us in their boat, and overcoming the power of the waves by rowing many various stretches, brought us to Cæsarea Stratonis. There they starved us and beat us and terrified us that we might not disclose the truth, and having changed our names, they sold us to a certain widow, a very honorable woman named Justa. She, having bought us, treated us as sons, so that she carefully educated us in Greek literature and liberal arts, and when we grew up, we also attended philosophic studies, that we might be able to confute the Gentiles by supporting the doctrines of the divine religion by philosophic disputations. But we adhered, for friendship's sake and boyish companionship, to one Simon, a magician, who was educated along with us, so that we were almost deceived by him. For there is mention made in our religion of a certain prophet, whose coming was hoped for by all who observe that religion, through whom immoral and happy life is promised to be given to those who believe in him. Through whom immortal and happy life is promised to be given to those. Now we thought this Simon was he, but these things shall be explained to you, O mother, at a more convenient season. Meanwhile, when we were almost deceived by Simon, a certain colleague of my master Peter, Zacchaeus by name, warned us that we should not be duped by the magician, but presented us to Peter on his arrival, that by him we might be taught the things which were sound and perfect. And this, we hope, will happen to you also, even as God has vouchsafed it to us, that we may be able to eat and have a common table with you. Thus, therefore, it was, O mother, that you believed that we were drowned in the sea while we were stolen by pirates. When Nicetas had spoken thus, our mother fell down at Peter's feet, entreating and beseeching him that both herself and her hostess might be baptized without delay. That, says she, I may not even for a single day suffer the loss of the company and society of my sons. In like manner, we, her sons, also entreated Peter, but he said, What? Do you think that I alone am without sympathy, and I do not wish you to enjoy your mother's society at meals? But she must fast at least one day first and be baptized, and this because I have heard from her a certain declaration by which her faith has been made manifest to me, and which has given evidence of her belief. Otherwise she must have been instructed and taught many days before she could have been baptized. So notice in the preparation for the baptism, he's saying she must fast at least one day. So in one of the documents in the Nazarene, in the Rock of Assure Foundation, this book known as the Didache, which means teaching, the full title of the book is the teaching of the Messiah, Yeshua, to his apostles for the nations, for the Gentiles. There's actually instructions in that document for baptism, and it demands that the person to be baptized and the person doing the baptism is to fast for at least 2 days. And it actually suggests that the entire congregation fasts for 2 days. And Peter, in this narrative, he's making a bit of an exception. He's saying, okay, so we'll make it 1 day for her, because she has led this pious life of chastity or whatever. But normally it'd be 2 days that you'd have to fast. So could you imagine how powerful it would be if every time there was to be a baptism at a church or at a congregation, if the entire congregation fasted for 2 days ahead of time? Of course, this is one of those things that has kind of fallen by the wayside over time, and no one, it's hard to find a church where people fast at all, to be honest with you, much less where a church fasts as a congregation. All right, chapter 35. Then said I pray you, my master Peter, tell us, what is the declaration which you say afforded you evidence of her faith? And then Peter, it is her asking that her hostess, whose kindness she wished to requite may be baptized along with her. Now she would not ask this grace to be bestowed upon her whom she loves unless she believed that there was a great blessing on baptism. Whence also I find fault with very many who, when they have themselves been baptized and believe, yet do nothing worthy of faith with those whom they love, such as wives or children or friends, or whom they do not exhort to that which they themselves have attained, as they would do if indeed they believed that eternal life is thereby bestowed. In short, if they see them to be sick or to be subject to any danger bodily, they grieve and mourn, because they are sure that in this destruction threatens them. So then, if they were sure of this, that the punishment of eternal fire awaits those who do not worship God, when would they cease warning or exhorting? Or if they refused, how would they not mourn and bewail them, being sure that eternal torments awaited them? Now therefore, we shall send for that woman at once, and see if she loves the faith of our religion, and as we find, so shall we act. But since your mother has judged so faithfully concerning baptism, let her only fast for 1 day before baptism. But she declared with an oath in presence of my master Peter's wife that from the time she recognized her son, she had been unable to take any food from excess of joy, excepting only that yesterday she drank a cup of water. Peter's wife also bore witness, saying that it was even so. Then Aquila said, "What then hinders her from being baptized?" Then Peter, smiling, said, "But this is not the fast of baptism, for it is not done in order to baptize." Then Nicetas said, "But perhaps God, wishing that our mother, on our recognition, should not be separated for even 1 day from participation in our table, preordained this fasting. For as in her ignorance she preserved her chastity, that it might profit her in order to the grace of baptism, so she fasted before she knew the reason of fasting, that it might profit her in order to baptism, and that immediately from the beginning of her acquiescence she might enjoy communion of the table with us." So, pausing here for a moment, just notice Peter's response to this. Like, this is, this is a way that the sons of this lady kind of reasoned this out as an excuse to forego the rules, and Peter is going to refute that idea. He's going to say, no, we need to do this thing by the book. We need to do this thing the way we were instructed, which, once again, I think it emphasizes the importance of this in the early church, the fasting for the purpose of baptism, which, once again, I really think it's a shame that this has been set aside and no one fasts anymore in preparation for baptism. Then said Peter, "Let not the wicked one prevail against us, taking occasion from a mother's love, but let you and me with you fast this day along with her, and tomorrow she shall be baptized. For it is not right that the precepts of truth be relaxed and weakened in favor of any person or friendship." So let's highlight this. A few weeks ago, I was doing one of these videos, and I spoke about the two greatest commands, right? To love God and to love your neighbor. And over time, the church and we as believers, it's almost like that first commandment's been forgotten to some extent and been pushed aside in the name of showing love to your neighbor. And I don't think it's accidental. There's forces out there that are looking to normalize sin and to normalize especially destructive sin that's destructive to a society, which I think you can make the case that all sin is destructive to society, but there's some sins that are very destructive. Adultery, fornication, things like that, because it undermines the family, it undermines the fabric of the society itself. And there are things that are tolerated today that the church itself is almost, I mean, it's not that it's powerless to resist, it's that it doesn't even try to resist it. There is no resistance put up any longer to things like this whole like homosexual mafia that's pretty much taken over the world, it seems like. There is no resistance to the transgender stuff and all these various agendas of just normalizing various types of fornication in the name of equality. And what I was saying the other day is that loving your neighbor does not supersede loving God. So, and it doesn't have to be even a sin as egregious as the ones I just mentioned. It could be any type of sin. But if you are going to tolerate and normalize sin for the sake of friendship or to favor a person, that's wrong. Peter here is not willing to even relax the precept that they have to fast before baptism. Peter understands, rightfully so, that there are certain rules that Yeshua taught. And it's not right to set them aside out of friendship to your neighbor. Well, wait a minute. What about loving your neighbor? Would it not be loving this woman to set aside the rules that were put in place by Yeshua? No, it's not. You can't put friendship with a person over friendship with God. And that's what's being said here. So that's something that we need to remember. Yes, there's two primary commandments: love God, love your neighbor. And then you got the 10 commandments, which are based off of those two. The first 4 commandments are about loving God, and the last 6 are more about loving your neighbor, although there is some crossover between the two. And then from those 10 commandments, that's where you get all these other commandments that are in the Torah, which, according to Professor Mendenhall, and I agree with him on this, I think that we should view those as case law. These are various ways in which the early Israelites interpreted loving God, loving your neighbor, following the 10 commandments. In fact, Professor Mendenhall, he's in his book Ancient Israel's Faith and History, he makes the case that you shouldn't view the 10 commandments as the only commands. Like, you shouldn't, like, they should be viewed as a set of like 10 examples of the way a person who loves God and loves his neighbor, a person who's in this covenant with God. These are 10 examples of things that you should or should not do. That you should naturally, if you're fit to be in a covenant with God, if you truly love God and love your neighbor, these are 10 commandments that you will naturally do. And so it's almost like a set of guidelines. And then from those 10 guidelines, then you can figure out how you should live the rest of your life. Because you can't make the Bible doesn't cover every single scenario that you could possibly come into. Especially if you look at modern society where we have technology, you have dating apps and porn websites and all kind of stuff that's not addressed in the Bible. And so you have to use the information you have in those 10 precepts and in the other examples in the scripture to learn how to navigate modern society. So if you're familiar with what it is that God demands of us, the type of person that you need to be in covenant with the Creator, then you don't necessarily need a written law for everything to know what the right decision is. Just look at various ways people are dishonest. So you're told not to lie. Let your yea be yea and your no be no. So anytime you're in a situation where you're tempted to lie, then you know how to make the right decision. Anytime you're in the law about not coveting your neighbor's wife. So like if you feel yourself becoming attracted to someone that is not lawful for you to be with, then you know how to behave in that situation. You know to walk away. You know to guard your eyes, to guard your thoughts, to not allow yourself to fall into that temptation. So there's a whole level of maturity, like a level of development that you have to reach to where you can navigate your life in a way to where you're in alignment with God, but where you don't necessarily need written instructions for every single scenario that you would run across. That you can use what is written as a guide to help you navigate the things that are not written. But at no time does loving your neighbor supersede doing what is right in the precepts that we have. He says, let us not shrink, therefore, from suffering along with her, for it is a sin to transgress any commandment. So if you are transgressing a commandment in order to show favor to a person, then you're sinning. Let us teach our bodily senses which are without us to be in subjection to our inner senses, and not compel our inner senses which savor the things that be of God to follow the outer senses which savor the things that be of the flesh. I think this whole paragraph maybe should be bolded. It's important. For to this end also the master commanded, saying, whoever shall look upon a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. And to this he added, if your right eye offends you, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it is profitable for you that one of your members perish, rather than your whole body shall be cast into hell fire. He does not say, has offended you, that you should then cast away the cause of sin after you have sinned. But if it offends you, that is, that before you sin, you should cut off the cause of the sin that provokes and irritates you. So, of course, I think that the idea is not necessarily cutting off body parts. It's a lot easier to just practice discipline. If something is tempting you, remove yourself from the temptation. Discipline yourself. But in order to emphasize the importance of it, Yeshua says it's better for you to even cut off that body part, which I think resisting temptation and avoiding temptation is a little bit easier than doing that. But let none of you think, brethren, that the master commended the cutting off of members. His meaning is that the purpose should be cut off, not the members, and the causes which allure to sin, in order that our thought, borne up in the chariot of sight, may push toward the love of God, supported by the bodily senses, and not give loose reins to the eyes of the flesh as wanton horses, eager to turn their running outside the way of the commandments, but may subject the bodily sight to the judgment of the mind, and not suffer those eyes of ours, which God intended to be viewers and witnesses of his work, to become panderers of evil desire. So in other words, if you're tempted, remove yourself from the thing that tempts you. Get yourself under control. And therefore let the bodily senses as well as the internal thought be subject to the law of God, and let them serve his will, whose work they acknowledge themselves to be. Therefore, as the order and reason of this mystery demanded, on the following day she was baptized in the sea, and returning to the lodging was initiated in all the mysteries of religion in their order. And we, her sons, Nicetas and Aquila and I, Clement, were present. And after this we dined with her, and glorified God with her, thankfully acknowledging the zeal and the teaching of Peter, who showed us, by the example of our mother, that the good of chastity is not lost with God, as, on the other hand, unchastity does not escape punishment, though it may not be punished immediately, but slowly. And so well-pleasing, said he, is chastity to God, that it confers some grace in the present life, even upon those who are in error, for future blessedness is laid up for those who only preserve chastity and righteousness by the grace of baptism. For future blessedness is laid up for those only who preserve chastity and righteousness by the grace of baptism. In short, that which has befallen your mother is an example of this. For all this welfare has been restored to her in reward of her chastity, for the guarding and preserving of which self-restraint alone is not sufficient, but when anyone perceives that snares and deceptions are being prepared, he must straightway flee as from the violence of fire or attack of a mad dog. And do not trust that he can easily frustrate snares of this kind by philosophizing or by humoring them, but as I've said, he must flee and withdraw to a distance, as your mother also did through her true and entire love of chastity. And on this account she has been presented to you, and you to her, and in addition she has been endowed with the knowledge of eternal life. When he had said this, and much more to the same effect, the evening having come, we went to sleep. So that is the end of Book 7, and so next time we'll pick it up in Book 8. Thanks for listening.